Hi, I'm Elspeth, and this is the story of how my sister sold our grandmother's beach house without telling me. She said I was too busy. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was realizing it had been planned long before the grief even had a chance to begin. Why would someone rewrite a family's history while you're still living in it? Have you ever found out something important after everyone else decided it didn't involve you? The sink water was still running when the phone lit up. I let it ring longer than I usually would, mostly because I already knew who it was. Verena only ever called when she needed to make something sound casual that wasn't casual at all. I answered with a damp hand, dish soap still clinging to my wrist. Her voice came through, smooth and sterile. "I sold it," she said, just like that. "You were always too busy anyway." The way she said it felt like a line rehearsed, not for me, but for herself. I didn't ask what she meant. I didn't need to. The only thing left to sell was the house. The house, our grandmother's house on Isle of Palms. The only place that ever felt like it stood still while everything else in life moved too fast. The silence between us lasted longer than it should have. I didn't hang up, but I didn't speak either. She filled the space with a shallow chuckle. "I'm sure you're shocked, but look, you haven't been home in, 3 years? Maybe more? I figured it was just time." Just time. As if timing was all that mattered. I hung up, not because I was angry, but because I couldn't afford to react the way she wanted me to. I turned off the faucet, leaned against the counter, and closed my eyes. The kitchen light above me hummed. I could still hear the ocean from the summers of my childhood. The sound of it leaking through old wood, the sticky heat, the way the brass doorknob would leave a green stain on my hand. I saw myself at 8, then 15, then 21, standing on that porch like it could hold all my versions together. I saw Grandma's sun hat hanging on the hook. I saw the dust particles dancing in the hallway she never let anyone sweep too harshly. I opened my eyes. The warmth of the memory did nothing to thaw the chill Verena left behind. I walked to my desk, opened my laptop, and started pulling up old emails. There it was, plain and present at the bottom of her signature from an email last year. Verena Langford, executor of the DeWitt estate. It had looked so official then. I had skimmed past it like it was a detail that didn't involve me, but now it was the whole story. I remembered another call, months before Grandma passed, where Verena asked me if I knew what beachside properties were going for these days. Said it like she was making conversation. I thought she was just being nosy. Now I knew better. She was preparing, before the grief even had a name. I opened the bottom drawer of my nightstand and found the silver key, still on the same blue ribbon, the one Grandma had given me at the hospital, slipping it into my palm before her eyes glazed over. "You'll know when to use it," she had said. Maybe this was it. My phone vibrated again. Verena. I let it buzz until it stopped. I wasn't ready to talk to her. I was too busy remembering who I was. It started with a ping at 6:17 a.m., a tag notification from someone I hadn't spoken to since grad school. They'd posted a memory from 2 years ago, something about the day we all said goodbye to Mavis. I tapped the link with a kind of dread I didn't understand until the screen loaded. The image was a group photo, taken on the lawn of the beach house, everyone dressed in muted tones. Verena stood in the center like she'd orchestrated the whole thing. The caption read, "Only those truly there for her are in these frames." I zoomed in, almost against my will. No one had left space where I should have been. There wasn't an empty chair, no flicker of my face in the crowd, just absence. I backed out and opened the group chat on my phone, the one called The Langford Circle. Not found. I scrolled back through old messages, realized I hadn't received anything from that group in months, maybe a year. Then I remembered. I hadn't left. I'd been removed. I pulled up Verena's Facebook. Her albums were still public. I found the one labeled Farewell Mavis. Slide after slide, candlelight photos, children I barely recognized holding framed letters, one of Verena speaking at the service, face turned slightly like she wanted the lighting just right. Not a single image of me, not even a mention, not a wish she could have made it, not a thinking of Elspeth. Nothing. I stared at the screen until my eyes blurred, then closed the app like it had burned me. Grief doesn't always rewrite history. Sometimes it deletes people from it. I stood at the window in my kitchen, the sky still gray, light trying to be morning. The silence felt different today, not heavy, just clear. It hit me, like the kind of realization you feel more in your stomach than your mind. Maybe I wasn't just forgotten. Maybe I'd been erased. After Mavis passed, I kept calling on Sundays, left voicemails on holidays. I sent flowers to the beach house every Mother's Day, even after Verena said they didn't need more. I thought they were just busy. But silence, when repeated, becomes a language of its own. I sat down and typed out a message to Verena. Was I ever going to be told? I stared at the blinking cursor, then deleted every word. Because some questions don't need answers. Not when you've already heard them through everything that wasn't said. They erased me. I was still here. I still existed. And that was about to matter. I didn't sleep after the album. Not really. I just lay there, watching the light shift on the ceiling, knowing something had been taken from me and not knowing where to look for it. By morning, I was in front of my laptop, the blue light washing over me like I hadn't moved all night. I typed Verena's name into the search bar of my inbox. There it was, subject line, quick sign-off needed, estate repair. The email was dated 11 months ago. I remembered it vaguely. It had come on a day I was sprinting between depositions, eating granola bars for lunch in elevators. I clicked, barely reading the attachments, just trusting that my sister wouldn't put anything truly consequential in there without saying so. And I signed. The file was still attached. I opened it, heart pounding faster than I wanted to admit. The wording wasn't overly deceptive. It didn't need to be. Just dry enough, just vague enough. The line that mattered was buried. Authorization granted to sole executor to act on behalf of estate matters, including transfer of titled property. Including transfer. I had signed myself out of my own inheritance. I closed the laptop and stared at the wall for a long time. Then I thought of June. June Redford, Verena's legal assistant now, my classmate back in law school. Back when we both still thought the world was ruled by due process and decency. I called her. I didn't plan to, but my hands moved before my doubts could catch up. She answered after 3 rings, sounding surprised but not unfriendly. Elspeth? Wow, it's been a minute. We caught up for a few minutes. Work, cities, the vague check-ins that don't really check anything. Then I asked, "Did you see the estate authorization I signed last year?" Silence. Then June's voice, low and careful. "Yes, I saw it." I waited. "She said you'd sign anything," she continued. "Said you were too trusting, that you always assumed family meant safety." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. It wasn't the deception that hurt the most. It was how predictable I'd been. I thanked her, gently, and hung up. The quiet in the room felt less like peace and more like realization. I walked slowly through my apartment, my eyes catching on the boxes I still hadn't unpacked from my move last year. One had a label that read, "Home Photos." I hadn't opened it, not even once. I sat beside it on the floor, lifted the lid, and peeled away the layers of paper. Grandma's face smiled back at me from a faded print. My hands, smaller then, curled around a lemonade glass on the porch steps. I hadn't stopped being a part of that house. They had just stopped treating me like I was. I carried the laptop back to my desk, printed the PDF from Verena's email, and placed it beside my law degree on the table. The hallway lights outside my apartment flickered. This time, I didn't flinch. She used my trust to take my name off the deed. I was about to use her arrogance to put it back. The air hit different when I stepped out of the car. It smelled like salt, yes, but also like something had been wiped clean. Too clean. The front porch had been repainted. The bushes were clipped into even domes, unnatural and crisp, like someone had Googled real estate curb appeal and followed it to the letter. The house looked presentable, that was the word, like a stranger had dressed it for someone else's funeral. I walked slowly around the side, gravel crunching under shoes that used to walk barefoot here. The back gate creaked less than it used to, and that's when my stomach dropped. The orange tree was gone. I froze mid-step. The patch where it stood was bare, soil too fresh, too level. No roots, no stump. Just silence where life had once rooted deep. I moved to the spot like it could still be warm, like it might still remember me. My knees sank into the earth. The dirt was soft, the kind of softness that comes when something is ripped out, not let go. I remember the day we planted it, me with my hands covered in soil, Mavis handing me the sapling, saying it would outlive us both. It didn't. This wasn't renovation. It was revision, erasure. And for what? I stood, brushing my palms off slowly, and made my way to the front yard. Something tugged at me before I even saw it. A young tree, small, ornamental, stood near the mailbox. It was barely taller than my shoulder. At its base, a bronze plaque gleamed in the sun. Donated by C. Rusk. I stared at it so long my vision blurred. I wasn't angry, not in the way people expect. It wasn't heat, it was cold. Even the things he hadn't lived had his name on them now. I walked back around the house without looking at the windows. I didn't want to see the new curtains, or the porch furniture that didn't match the weathered wood. Instead, I returned to the patch of dirt. I knelt again, more slowly this time, and I dug, with my hands, with the tips of my fingers, just enough to find it, a piece of root, thin and twisted, still clinging to the earth. I held it in my palm like it could hear me. You didn't grow for nothing. They buried the tree, but they forgot the woman who remembered how it grew. Sylvan's office always smelled faintly like old leather and lemon oil. It wasn't cozy, but it was clean. Decided. Much like the man himself. I sat across from him as he methodically opened a file folder, then another, until his entire desk was a grid of financial snapshots. "These are the estate ledgers from the last 12 months, he said, not looking up, pulled directly from the trust account. I nodded, even though I didn't fully know what I was nodding at yet. We began going through the pages. Most were dry, expected charges, pest control, lawn service, minor repairs. Then Sylvan's hand paused. He slid a page closer to me. This one. I leaned in. A $2,700 charge to a private wellness spa in Savannah. Another, $1,900 to a boutique wine distributor. A third, $3,800 labeled Golf Club Membership Renewal. All filed under maintenance. Sylvan didn't say anything. He didn't have to. My stomach twisted, not because I didn't expect it, but because I had. And that made it worse. The next document had a logo printed faintly in the corner. A receipt. Louis Vuitton. $5,300. I remembered the bag. Verena had flaunted it at our mother's funeral luncheon like it was armor. Sleek, black, impossibly expensive. She said it was a gift from Clayton. It wasn't. I stared at the line item until the numbers blurred. Sylvan spoke softly. This is enough to activate the clause. I nodded again, this time with full awareness. It wasn't relief that settled in my chest. It was fury, sharp-edged, structured, clear. For years I had let her narrate the version of our family people chose to believe. I let her take the spotlight, the credit, the closeness. I told myself it didn't matter. But this time, the betrayal had paperwork, dates, amounts, categories. This time it had a ledger. This isn't just unethical, I said. It's surgical. Sylvan's expression was unreadable. He tapped the corner of the receipt gently, then pushed a new document toward me, a challenge form, the legal mechanism to invoke the character clause. The words blurred for a moment. My fingers hovered over the pen. She took everything that had a name, I whispered. Then I signed. Now I was taking back what had meaning. Some holidays have a silence that wraps itself around memory like a ribbon you can't quite untie. Thanksgiving when I was 9. Verena spilled cranberry sauce on her dress and cried. Mom took her upstairs to help her change, while I finished setting the table. I remember folding every napkin into triangles, because Grandma said triangles were strong. And Christmas 2 years later, Verena got the bicycle, I got the helmet. I wore the helmet anyway, rode her bike when she wasn't looking, then lied and said I hadn't. Not because I wanted her things, I just wanted to know how it felt to be picked first. In those memories, Mavis was the only one who didn't overlook me. She never said much, but when she did, it made you feel like you were the only one she'd ever talked to that way. I didn't know how much I needed that until I opened her desk drawer and found the envelope. It was sealed, the flap still pressed tight, Yellowed slightly with time but whole. My name was on it, just my name. I sat down on the floor. The letter was short, 2 lines. You always stayed quiet, I always saw you. Don't chase the spotlight, child. Hold the ground. My chest ached in the kind of way you can't cry out. She didn't tell me to forgive. She didn't tell me to fight. She just reminded me that I mattered, whether anyone else noticed or not. That night, I walked the beach. The tide was low, the wind steady. I thought about the claws, the signatures, the lawyers, and I thought about cycles, how people repeat what they know and pass it down like heirlooms. Maybe Verena didn't mean to be cruel. Maybe she was just reenacting everything we'd been taught. That survival meant shine. That love meant proximity. But knowing that didn't mean I could let it continue. I could forgive her. But I couldn't forgive the pattern. So I kept the legal challenge active. Not to punish her, but to remind both of us that silence isn't the same as peace. When I got back to the house, the porch light was on. I hadn't left it that way. I opened the door, heart steady. Verena stood in the hallway, hands folded like a child at confession. You found it, didn't you? She asked. Her voice was smaller than I'd ever heard it. I didn't hesitate. I did, I said, and I'm not giving it back. Sylvan's name lit up on my phone just after 8 a.m. I almost didn't answer. I wasn't in the mood for more paperwork or polite, precise disappointment. But his voice wasn't clinical this time. It had weight. There's something you need to see, he said. It's about Clayton. It always came back to Clayton, didn't it? Even when it was Verena's hand pushing the knife, it was his name on the hilt. I met Sylvan in his office half an hour later. The folder was already open on his desk. Bank records, loan requests, flagged wire transfers, and a name, C. Rusk, the Florida property, the failed development. It had all been tied, not to Verena directly, but to her husband. Property movement started 6 weeks before the listing, Sylvan explained. Pressure from creditors. He was using her name to shield himself. And she knew, I said quietly. Sylvan didn't confirm. He didn't have to. I drove to their house with a calm that didn't belong to the day. The gates opened like they still thought I was family. The lawn was perfect, the hedges symmetrical, not a single weed. Inside, Verena looked surprised, but only briefly. Clayton didn't bother hiding his smirk. Come to gloat? He asked. I handed her the documents. You should read this. Verena's eyes scanned quickly, then again, slower. She didn't sit down. This is ridiculous, she said, but her voice cracked at the end. I looked at her. Not with pity, not even anger. Just clarity. You knew, I said. You knew he'd failed before. You knew this was another risk, but you thought if you wrapped it in silence and charity, no one would notice. She didn't deny it. Clayton leaned against the doorway. She didn't ask questions. That was the deal. Verena's shoulders dropped like something broke inside her. Not from what I said, but from hearing him say it out loud. You chose him, I said. Over me, over Grandma, over the truth. Again. I walked out before she could explain. This time I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I didn't even close the door gently. Back in my car, my phone buzzed. Sylvan. We've completed the paperwork, he said. I just need your signature. I stared out at the neat rows of homes, all dressed in their suburban perfection. I signed the paper Verena never thought I'd read, I said aloud. Now I'd sign the one she never imagined I'd own. The envelope was smaller than I expected. Just ivory paper, no seal, no embellishment. Sylvan handed it to me like it was fragile, though it weighed less than a memory. We stood in the study, morning light crawling slowly across the old floorboards. The wind outside pushed against the glass like it wanted to remind me that the world was still moving. This was in the back of Mavis's safe, he said quietly. A codicil, not legally binding, but it carries intention. I opened it. 1 page. Handwritten. Should the house fall into rightful hands, a restoration fund shall be made available, but only if the path forward is chosen without malice. My heart didn't leap or sink. It simply paused. Is she saying I have to forgive? I asked, still staring at the ink. She's saying, Sylvan replied, that she didn't want the house rebuilt on retribution. I folded the paper neatly, twice, and set it down. I wanted to scream, not because I was angry, but because I finally understood how love could demand more of you than pain ever could. I walked the house. Each room still smelled like dust and memory. The dining chairs leaned against the wall as if bracing for judgment. A photo of Grandma and me sat in the hallway, its frame slightly tilted, like it never wanted to be fully straightened. I didn't cry. I didn't argue with the ghost of what this place had meant. I just asked myself one question. What does justice look like if it can't hold a grudge? My phone buzzed. I didn't recognize the number, but I picked up anyway. Verina's voice came through, already brittle. "The house is yours, isn't it?" "Yes." "So what now? You burn me or bury it?" I walked to the front window. The sun had stretched fully over the grass. "Neither," I said. "But I'm keeping the house, and I'm keeping the truth." There was silence on the line. I didn't fill it. Later that afternoon, Sylvan laid the grant paperwork in front of me. No fancy ribbon, just black ink and lines waiting to be crossed. He watched me like he knew I wouldn't hesitate, and I didn't. I signed, not to punish her. I signed to build something she couldn't erase. The foundation didn't shake when I signed, but something inside me finally stopped trembling. 2 weeks had passed. Enough time for the adrenaline to drain, for the air to settle, for me to understand that silence could feel full, not empty. The beach house didn't hum anymore. It didn't resist my footsteps. It didn't wait for a verdict. It just stood. I walked through it slowly, touching the back of each chair, pausing at the window ledges where salt used to gather in white streaks. The new paint was too smooth, but I didn't mind. Some things don't need to be restored to be respected. The envelope was still on the table, my name scrawled on the front, Verina's shaky handwriting betraying more than she ever would out loud. Inside was a check. Too much to be a token, not enough to be guilt. I hadn't asked for it. I didn't want it, but I knew what I'd do with it. I'd send it back, quietly, without a note. Let her decide what the silence meant. Outside, the wind stirred. I opened the mailbox out of habit and found a single folded piece of paper. No envelope, just her handwriting again. "You didn't destroy me, but you made me look." It was the closest thing to honesty Verina had ever sent me, and it didn't taste sweet. It didn't need to. I stood in front of the mirror later that night, not to check my reflection, but to see if I recognized who was staring back. I did. I pulled open the top drawer of my dresser and found the last key she'd given me years ago. I held it a moment, then placed it gently inside, closed the drawer without ceremony. There was nothing left to unlock. The photo box was next. I opened it and sifted through the years. Mavis in her garden hat, Verina grinning with ice cream, me in the background, half lit, half invisible, except for one photo. Mavis had her hand on my shoulder. I kept that one. I thought winning would feel louder, but maybe healing is quieter than that. As the light dimmed, I stepped out onto the porch. The ocean murmured in the distance, and the garden was still, except for one thing. A new sapling. Small, brave, and mine. No plaque, just roots. This house never needed to be mine. I just needed it to remember me. Sometimes walking away isn't weakness. It's wisdom. I used to believe that belonging meant staying quiet, bending to fit into a space that never had room for me. But healing taught me something else. You don't need to win the war to reclaim your peace. You just need to choose yourself, even when it's hard. Maybe you felt erased too, forgotten in your own story. If so, I hope this reminded you that your presence matters, even when others pretend it doesn't. So let me ask you, have you ever had to let go of something, not out of anger, but to protect your peace? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If this story touched your heart, leave a 1 in the comments or tell me what state you're watching from. If it didn't connect with you, I'm open to hearing why. Your honesty matters. And hey, if you want more stories that reach into the quiet corners of life, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Your presence here means more than you know.